Over the past year, the biggest question I've gotten asked is how I color grade my videos. Can you teach me how to color grade? And in this video, I'm going to do exactly that. I'm going to show you all step by step the exact workflow I use when color grading my footage. We're going to get really in depth in this video. I'm going to go through each individual slider in Adobe Premiere and tell you not only how it works, but why I use it, why I choose to use the sliders I use, and how I use all the sliders together to create a specific look. So, hey everybody, what's up? My name is Zachary Gutherman. I am a sports videographer, cinematographer, and video editor. And in this video, I want to give a full breakdown of my color grading workflow. This past weekend, I was in Clemson, South Carolina, filming with the Savannah Bananas. They just played in front of a sold-out Death Valley Stadium, which was super cool. And I got to be a part of it. I got to be in the action, and I have not color graded any of the clips from that game yet. So I want to take you all along with me and really show you step by step how I would color grade. So that's going to make this a very raw, a very real, and hopefully a very informative tutorial. Now, before we begin the tutorial though, we got to do a little bit of housekeeping. So the first thing I want to show you is actually my color grading setup. So here is a look at my desk. So this is the desk that I will be using to color grade on. I've got my laptop here with Adobe Premiere. We're going to be coloring in Premiere, but I want to take a look at the lighting because behind my computer right now, I have a desk lamp, and it basically is providing a really nice backlight to my computer. And the reason I do that is because you want to have a backlight when you're color grading so that you're not actually, making your screen the brightest thing in the room. Because when your screen is the brightest thing in the room, you're going to actually really mess with your eyes and it's going to distract the way you color. So not only am I having my physical computer screen backlit to make my eyes more comfortable and see the screen more correctly, I also have to do some things in the settings to help that as well. So if we go into our system settings here in our Mac and we go down here to displays, there are two boxes that are very important that you have unchecked. The first is this one right here that says automatically adjust brightness. And basically what this means is your Mac is going to adjust the brightness of your screen based on the environment you're in. So if I'm outside and that's checked, the Mac is going to adjust my brightness so that I can see better when I'm outside. Same if I'm in a dark scenario. The idea is that it makes it easier for you to see your screen, but you want to have that checked off because when you're color grading, you want to see your screen at a neutral brightness. If my brightness on my Mac is all the way up, then I'm going to grade my video thinking that that's the brightness that everyone's screen is going to be at, and that's not the case. You want to edit your brightness on your Mac to be somewhere in the middle. So you can see right here, my brightness is in the dead center, and that's intentional. If I go too high, that's going to affect the brightness of my computer screen, which is going to affect the brightness of the image I'm trying to color. Same thing if I go too low. If I have my screen too dark, I'm going to boost the brightness of my video clip thinking, oh, I can't see it, when in reality, that's not the case. So we're going to have our brightness set dead center there. That's super important. And the second thing that's even more important, I can't stress this enough, is true tone. And true tone you want to have checked off. True tone is basically Apple's version of auto white balance for your computer screen. That way, if I'm in a very bright sunny environment, it's going to adjust the temperature of my screen so that the white still looks white. Same thing if I'm in a very blue situation. It's basically the same thing auto white balance would do in a camera, but for your computer screen. And for obvious reasons, that's bad for color grading because if I'm editing this and there's a window behind me and a cloud shifts, then my whole computer screen would see, oh, the cloud is in front of the light, and so let's adjust the computer brightness so that the whites still look white. And that's just going to totally fuck up your color grading. Like, I cannot stress that enough. You have to have automatic adjust brightness and true tone turned off. So now that we've got that taken away, let's jump into Adobe Premiere and begin the process. So we're going to create a new project here. Just like so, we're going to call this Zach Clemson Color, just like that. And we're going to put it on my hard drive, boom, create, just like so. I do want to apologize in advance because I am screen recording my screen. It's going to take a little longer for some applications to work, especially as we get deeper into this because it's probably going to be a long video. So hopefully that doesn't completely screw up this process. But now that we are in Adobe Premiere Pro, we can start, selecting the footage that we want to color. So I'm going to go into Finder right here, And I'm going to go into my hard drive, we're gonna go into the raw footage, and we're gonna go into Clemson, and we're gonna start on card 1. And you'll see I have my clips all tagged, so when I'm going through my footage and tagging my clips, anything with the purple tag is one of my personal favorite shots. And that's just an easy way for me to see, you know, when they're in a list, oh, this is one of my favorite shots. And usually these purple clips are the ones that I will color grade and share on my own personal social medias and on my own, you know, cinematography reels, stuff like that, because those are the shots I'm the most proud of. So we're gonna do 3 different clips in this video. The first clip we're gonna do is from pregame, where it was nice and sunny out. You know, this is taking place about like 6:45, 7 o'clock-ish. Second clip we're gonna do is gonna be during the game, but it's gonna be slightly different, and I'll show you why in a moment. Again, kinda at that golden hour-y time. And the last clip we're gonna do is gonna be a night clip. So that way we can, you know, go through the process for 3 different lighting scenarios, and I'm gonna show you how I would color it. So the first clip that I wanna do is this shot right here of the Tiger Run with Coach Dabo Sweeny. So you can see this is basically what our clip looks like. So we're gonna take this clip and we're going to drag it into Adobe Premiere Pro, just like so. Now, before we get into anything else, I want to talk a bit about things that are going to help you in the color grading process, because color grading, like I said, is my favorite piece of the puzzle for, you know, creative video production. You know, it's just something that I really like because I feel like that's where I get to create a stylized look and I get to really make the clips look my own. You know, I get to give my unique touch to my footage, which is something I really like. And not only that, color grading is great because it creates a mood to your image. You know, it can make you feel a certain thing through the colors, whether it's subconsciously or consciously. You know, think about a movie like Mad Max that has a very unique color grade, and that's super different than the Harry Potter movies. And that's super different from a sci-fi movie. So color grading can have a really big effect on the way the audience member feels while watching your clip. And that's what I really like about it. So that is gonna be the goal of this whole process, is to create a feeling for your footage. And there's one thing that I think is just the overarching rule to color grading that I always follow, and that is contrast. If you've watched any of my videos before, you know that contrast is the key. I love contrast, and contrast is gonna be what we're trying to accomplish with this color grade for this shot. We want to have a lot of contrast. Contrast can be created through a lot of things. It starts with, you know, physically me filming this. You see we're shooting this shot on a 70-200 f2.8 lens. So there is already contrast because the background is getting blurred. It's got some separation to it. And there's also contrast because I was zoomed in. So there's a lot of compression. But we want to also create color contrast. So that's where color theory really starts to come in. If you look at a color wheel, anything that is opposite to each other is really great for contrast. So the most common example that any film nerd is going to tell you is, oh, orange and teal is the best look. And the reason they say orange and teal is the best look is because it has contrast. Orange is on one end of the color wheel, teal is on the other. Now, obviously, we don't want to just do orange teal. Because we're filming the Savannah Bananas and they're wearing yellow uniforms. So we want to contrast the yellow uniform with another color, which is in this case going to be more of a blue, aqua, tealish look. So that's kind of the look and the vibe we're going to be going for in this clip. So contrast is key. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a new sequence here. So we're going to go up here to File, New, and then Sequence, just like so. And I have a preset which I just call Zach Horizontal, that I use for all of my stuff, and we're just going to call this Clemson Color. But if we want to dig into the settings real quick, you can see we have a 1920 by 1080, which is HD video. This is a whole separate video, but you should never be editing in a 4K sequence. Always edit 1080. And we're going to come down here, 24 frames a second, and our codec is ProRes 4444, which is going to give us the most color information coming out of this sequence. So we're going to create our sequence and we're going to drag our clip in here just like that. I don't want generative extend, thank you though. So when we come in here, first thing we're going to do is scale our clip. So we're going to hit S to scale it, and we're going to need to select our in and out points for this clip. So this shot is all of the players, they're kind of just swaying, they're getting hyped up, and then you'll see right in here we have Dabo Sweeny, who is the head coach of Clemson, run out and really fire up the guys. See, he hits the rock and he just fires everybody up, and it's just a super cool moment. So this is the shot. So we're gonna find where we want to go. You'll see the camera completely shits itself there. That's because they shot off a cannon right next to me that I did not know was coming. So we're gonna obviously cut before we get to that. So I like the idea of Dabo lifts up his hat, and you want to cut at the end of the action because we're not cutting between two shots here. We want to finish the action. That's something Zach Campbell stresses a lot. So we're just gonna go here and we're gonna cut the second the hat goes up, just like that, boom. Now for our endpoint, obviously there's a lot of nonsense in the beginning here. You know, we don't need to see the crowd. It's fun to see Ian, but that's probably not gonna make the final shot. So we also see the camera's a little shaky and we have a guy there. So we're going to start the shot right about here as everybody is swaying, and you'll see we're gonna pick this frame because if you look at DR there, you can see he's looking away. So we're gonna start when everybody's looking, boom, that is our in and out points of this clip. And then we also have, if we want, we can go down here and select more after the camera shakes, get some of the running, because I think this could be a really fun moment too, just like that. We'll leave this like this for now, because I'm not sure if I'm going to want to keep the running as much as I want to keep the swaying, because the swaying is the fun part of the clip. But what we want to do now is we want to look at our frame rate, because coming down here, you'll see that this is a 60 frames a second clip, which means we have slow-mo, and that's going to make the video just look 10 times cooler. So we're going to unlink the audio, get rid of that, and we're going to go into our retime, and we're going to slow it down. If we have a 60 frames a second clip in a 24 frames per second timeline, we can slow it down 40% speed, just like that. And now we are talking. So we get the guy swaying. Honestly, I don't even know if I want to see the guy swaying because there's kind of some dead time before Dabo comes in. So maybe we start this clip right here. See the guys come in, he slaps the rock, everyone starts getting fired up. Yeah, that is money right there. So that is what we've got as our starting clip. Dabo lifts his arm up, boom, 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 boom. You can just slide this guy over a bit. Nice, and then right here, like I said, we lift the hat up, just like so. So this is going to be the first clip we color right there. So there is a look at it again in the full slow motion, boom. And obviously, the clip looks very dull and really desaturated. And the reason for that is because it was shot in log. So I was shooting on a Sony a7 IV for this clip, and we were shooting in S-Log3, which is basically the flattest profile. And essentially what that means is that when you're shooting in a really flat profile, it allows you to get the most dynamic range out of the image. That way, say I was a little too dark or a little too bright, I'd be able to correct it as opposed to shooting, you know, just regular Rec 709, then I wouldn't be able to save it. So there's a lot of dynamic range here, so I should be able to get a lot of color and a lot of information out of this shot. So now that we have our shot, we need to begin coloring. And one of the biggest misconceptions that I think people make is the difference between color correcting and color grading your footage. So color correction is actually the first step to color grading. And color correction refers to making your footage that was shot in S-Log look exactly like it did in real life. Because obviously, you know, this is not what reality looked like here. They did not look this desaturated in real life. So we want to correct our footage first before we can start grading it and adding some fun. So let's start with our color correction. So the first thing we want to do is find a hero shot. So the hero shot is essentially the freeze frame, the money grab shot of your clip. So for me, I think it's going to be this shot right here with Dabo having his hands in the air. So we're going to mark this here. This way we are basically just coloring based off this one freeze frame of our video. So now to begin the color correction process. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to come up here and we're going to open our Lumetri Scopes. And what I have right here is I have the Luma waveform right here. So you can see we have waveform, and the waveform type is Luma. So this is the Luma waveform. And essentially what this is it is an X-ray that goes over top of your footage. If you look down here, the number 0, this is a graph by the way. So the number 0 on this graph represents the darkest point of your image that you can go without losing any information in the image. So what do I mean by losing information? Losing information would be if I was to take this clip and just make it way too dark, you would start to lose information. Same thing up here at 100, that is the brightest you can go without losing any information in the image. So if I was to crank the exposure all the way, now you see we've lost a lot of information. So we want to use the graphs and use the Luma waveform to show us how to correctly expose our image without losing any information, because the last thing you want to do is lose information. When you lose information, your clip gets pixely, it gets over peaky, and it just doesn't look good. So we want to make sure the whole time we're color grading that we're not losing any information in this graph. So that's what we want to do. When we come over here to our Lumetri color panel, you're going to see a whole bunch of options. You have base correction, you have creative, you have curves, you have color wheels and match, you have HSL Secondary, and you have the vignette. And the nice thing is that these are lined up pretty much in the order you want to do them for color grading, with the first one being basic correction, and that is going to be for our color correction. So if I want to make this shot that was shot in S-Log look exactly like it did in real life, we're going to use the basic correction panel. So when I come in here, it's going to give you the option for an input LUT. LUT stands for lookup table. That basically means, you know, if I have an S-Log Direct 709 LUT, I can throw it on there and it's going to just automatically do it for me. But if you don't want to use a LUT to get your footage to Rec 709, you can actually come into your settings here, and underneath your project preferences here, you can say color, manage, auto detected log, and raw media. If you click that, it's going to actually auto color your clip to go to Rec 709. It's basically just like a Rec 709 conversion LUT built into Premiere. So that is two options you have if you want a quick color workflow. And on game day, just full transparency, on game day, this is what we're using to get our starting point for our footage. Now, I'm not an editor for the Bananas, I'm a videographer for the Bananas. So a lot of the times I'm filming and then passing off my card to another editor who's running upstairs, clicking this, making a few adjustments, and then putting out the video so that ideally, while I'm still on the field filming the 8th inning, the video from the 2nd inning is already out. That's like kind of the way the sports industry works. So this is a really good tool for that. But since we have time to kill, we're going to be doing this from scratch. But that's basically a hint of what it's going to look like. So we come back in here to our edit panel, and we're going to start with our base correction. So there's 3 steps to doing a base correction. The first thing is your exposure. The second thing is your white balance. And the third thing is your saturation. Exposure you can think of basically just like exposing camera. It is the brightness and the darkness of your image. And to adjust your exposure, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to look at our blacks and our whites. Now you're going to notice there's a dial right here that says exposure. Don't ever use this. Please. The exposure dial is just not good. And the reason it's not good is because it's going to adjust everything. So watch when I pull it on the graph, you see it's just bringing everything up or it's bringing everything down. It's not really paying attention to the shadows or the highlights or the white or the black points. It's just making everything brighter or darker. And it's really just like a lazy slider that isn't going to really help you at all in professional color grading. So the first thing we're going to do, step number 1, is we're going to adjust our blacks. So looking at our scope, remember this is a graph of the brightness of this image that's right in front of us. We want to adjust the black point of the image so that the blackest part of the image, the darkest point of the image, is hovering right around 0, which means it's as dark as it can go without losing any data. So we're going to take this black point and we're going to drag it all the way down. You'll see right about there, it's starting to get close. And if you look at the graph, that most likely is this guy's socks right here is that blackest point. You can see if I drag it down too far, now we're going to have no information there. This is just dark in his socks. We don't have any of that actual information. So, excuse me. So we're going to undo that and adjust that just about to 0, just like so. Next thing we're going to do is the same exact thing for the white point, and the white point is adjusting the brightest part of the image. So the brightest part of the image, according to this, is our sky. You can see it's a straight line right there, exactly where this sky is. But it's only hovering around 60, and we can take it all the way up to 100 without losing any information. So we're gonna do exactly that. We're gonna drag this all the way up. Now you're gonna notice right here, oh look, this thing right here, that's touching 100. Oh my God, it's too bright. If I drag it anymore, I'm gonna lose information. That's not actually the case, because if we look at our graph, what is this peak representing? Remember, it's an overlay of our footage, and this peak is representing this light, and this light is not the focal point of our image. So it's okay if it is too bright or too dark. So that's the first big key I think you gotta keep in mind when you're color grading, is that you wanna focus on your subject. You want your subjects to be the center of attention here, right? So if I made this just as bright as the image went, it's gonna look really flat and it's gonna feel really unflattering, because you know, the brightest thing is this random light bulb at the top. So we're going to adjust it so that the brightest point of our image, without going over, is the sky, because that's a lot more of what's important for our subjects, which are Dabo and the Savannah Bananas. So we're going to drag our white point up even higher there, so we are just about touching that 100 mark, just like that. And that is really adding brightness to our image. And yes, we may be losing a few pixels right up here in the detail of this lamp. I can guarantee you nobody gives a shit. So now that we have our whites adjusted, you're gonna notice that when we raised the whites of the image, it did bring some of the blacks along with it, you know, because it's just how math works, I suppose. So we're going to take our black point and we are going to lower that again, focusing right here that the darkest point of the image is not clipping 0. Boom. So now we have a much better exposure. And if we turn off our correction, you can see we started pretty dark. Honestly, I was probably a little underexposed here, and now we have it looking a whole lot better. Next thing we want to adjust is our shadows and our highlights. So shadows refer to the shadows of the image, so the darker portions of the image, and highlights refer to the brighter portions of the image. So what's the difference between whites and blacks and then highlights and shadows? Honestly, whites and blacks are truly the brightest and the darkest. Highlights and shadows are just fine-tuning them. So think of it as, once I've adjusted these, now I can adjust the shadows and the highlights. So it's basically just, you know, enhancing what you did with your whites and blacks. So the shadows, we can bring our shadows down, and you'll see that the shadows are reflecting things that should be in the shadow, like the top of the roof there. So we're going to bring our shadows down quite a bit. Yeah, that's looking pretty good. And then our highlights, we want to bring up our highlights again, just like so. Yeah, I'm liking that a lot. So that would be my exposure correction to this image. And again, you can see what it looked like before and after. So the exposure is feeling a lot more natural here. So the next thing we have to do now that our exposure is done is we have to adjust the white balance of our image. And white balance basically refers to making sure the whites of the image actually look white. And you adjust that using these two sliders right up here. We have the temperature slider and we have the tint slider. So the temperature slider, if you pull it to the left, your image gets more blue. If you pull it to the right, your image gets more orange. That is affecting the temperature of the image. Same thing here with the tint. If you slide it to the left, you get green. To the right, you get purple. So the temperature and tint sliders work together to create the white balance of the image. And a lot of people think that you just find something white. So if I find something white in this image, such as his shoes, a lot of people would think, oh, I just slide the sliders till the shoes look white. And technically, that is what white balancing is. But we have to remember what is the subject of our image. And the subject of our image is not Dabo's shoes. The subject of the image is Dabo and the Savannah Bananas players. So we want to adjust our white balance so that they look correct. You know, a lot of people think you just white balance based off something white in the image. That's not actually what you want to do. I like to white balance based off the skin. So I want to adjust the sliders so that the skin of these guys looks as natural as possible. That way, the image just looks as real as possible. So right now you can see on our image, it doesn't quite look natural. You know, they feel a little green. You know, his face looks a little green, so we want to take out the green. So we're going to do that by sliding the tint slider, just like so. We want to take out some of the green in him. Now he's feeling a little warm. So we're just going to literally adjust these two sliders until we have natural looking skin tones, just like so. And you can use everything else to guide it, but I like to just have natural looking skin tones. If we look at Niznik's teeth here, obviously those are white. We know his sleeves are white too, so we want to adjust that as well to feel white. So if I come here, this is obviously way too orange. It looks like they're like college kids going to prom. So we don't want to do that. But maybe they feel a little too blue here. You can just do one of these and one of those. And that would probably be the starting point for my white balance of this image. So now, if the only thing we're looking at is the brightness and the skin tones, we're looking pretty good. And again, I can show you off and on. The skin tones look much more natural. So a couple things I want to talk about with white balance before we continue. Like I said, the big thing is skin tones. You want to make your skin tones look right. And the biggest mistake people make is using that tint slider and sliding it to green. Your skin is not green. Your skin has a more orange and a more reddish tone. So that's why pushing the magenta into your skin tones is going to make it look so much more natural. Same thing with the temperature slider. Now here, obviously, I'm using more blue to kind of offset the amount of purple that went into it, or magenta rather. But if I was to make this too orange because, oh, the Savannah Bananas, they wear yellow, yellow's goes to orange, it probably should be warmer. Well, yes, but now their skin looks so off. You know, you see they look like they're going to college prom and they look like they just did a spray tan. So you don't want that either. So the big thing is kind of finding that happy medium that's going to make a natural looking skin. That's like the biggest thing I can emphasize, is you want your skin tones to look natural. And then the last thing we have to do for our base correction is adjust the saturation. This one's super fucking easy. Have a saturation slider right here. We are going to adjust that to saturate the image. Saturation refers to how much of the color we're seeing. So right now it looks pretty dull. If we drag our saturation all the way, now there's a shit ton more color in there. If you drag it all the way down, it's black and white. What I like to do for my base corrections always is 150 saturation. Now this is the only thing in here that I do based off a number, and you're gonna see why I do it based off the number in a second, but 150 saturation is the key for my base correction. Remember, I am not base correcting my footage here. I am color grading my footage, and the first step is the base correction. So we are going to adjust all of this based off this base correction. So now that I have my base correction done, I can look at it and see, okay, what do I like? What don't I like here? And the big thing I'm not liking here is that, you know what? They do feel a little too purple for me. So I'm going to adjust my footage accordingly. So if I move this back, then I probably want to move some of the blues back, just like so. And the reason for that is because these are like numerical values. So if I move this 5 points to the right, I should move this 5 points to the right and keep the same white balance. So we're just going to keep adjusting. Another thing you can look at, and that I'm looking at here, is I'm looking at their hats. So you see Ziggy has a white hat on. So I want to make sure that as I'm doing this, his hat is still looking natural. So I think maybe we do want to add a little bit more warmth into it. We definitely don't want his skin to look green. I think I like this. I think I like this as my base correction. Now that I have my base correction done, we can get into color grading the footage. So color grading, like I said, refers to creating the vibe, creating the feel, creating the cinematic look of the image. And this is where you get to get creative. Think of color grading as changing the way the colors of your footage looks to make you feel something. Because this right here that I have, my base correction, this is what it looked like on the day of. Like, if I would have looked up from my camera screen, this is what I would have seen. But this right here doesn't make me feel anything. And I want to feel something. This is the Savannah Bananas being coached by Dabo Sweeny in front of the biggest crowd they ever played at. And I want to feel that through this image, which I'm just not feeling right now. So we are going to do a color grade to create that feeling. Now, the first thing we're going to do is actually not so much the grade, but it's going to help affect the look, because I want this to feel cinematic. And this is a tip that I learned through the internet. I think I saw it on Instagram originally. But basically what I want to do is I want to duplicate this clip. So I'm going to duplicate this clip by holding down Option on my keyboard and dragging up. And now I have two of the same clip. And what I want to do is I'm going to come into here on my upper clip and I'm going to drag the saturation all the way to 0. Now, what we're doing here is we're trying to make the clip look more full, because if you look at the clip right now, it looks like, yeah, it was filmed on a video camera, but I want it to feel more filmic. I want it to feel more full. I want it to feel larger than life, because that's what this moment was. So when I drag this clip above it and I lower the saturation all the way, I can come into here to my effect controls, and we're gonna go into our blend mode, and we're going to do a hard light blend. And you can see what that did. That added a shit ton of contrast to this image. Almost too much contrast. So we're gonna adjust the opacity here just a bit. So that's what we started at, and now you can see this. Now we're getting something. So now just at 36% opacity, look at how much cooler this image looks. Look at how much more cinematic this image looks. We'll go back to our hero shot here. This is what we had to start with. This is what we have now. And this is already feeling like a much more full image. This is a tip that Hollywood uses a lot for daytime scenes because, you know, daytime can be ugly with lighting, you know, and this honestly didn't have the best lighting in the world. This trick though, just makes it go to a whole nother level. This already feels so much more cinematic, and all we did was duplicate the clip, drop the saturation, and do a hard light overlay. So this is where we're starting. I think I'm gonna adjust this slightly more because I don't wanna lose any information on the jerseys. If you look at split there, I don't wanna lose too much of his jersey. I kinda liked where 36 was though. So maybe we'll leave it there for now. If we look at our scopes, we're still safe because the brightest points are not peaking, the darkest points are not peaking. So now what we're gonna do is we're going to get creative. So this is where the fun parts come in. But the first thing I wanna do is add a little bit of contrast to this. So we could add contrast, but we're gonna actually do that later. I lied. But the next thing we have to do is we have to create an adjustment layer. So when you're color grading, all your color grade goes on an adjustment layer. You never want to do your color grade onto your original layers. Obviously, you know, we're already getting artsy as shit here and doing some like blend mode overlays to make the footage look more contrasty. But if I was to just start color grading onto here, say I make a mistake and I, you know, push this and now, oh my God, everything looks so messed up. And I don't know how to fix it because I did this and I did that. And now, oh my gosh, everything looks so bad. And I don't know how to adjust it and get back to my starting base correction. So we're going to create an adjustment layer just like this so that anything I do to my color grade, I can easily turn off and get back to my base correction. It's basically just a safety, but it's even more important than that because if you have multiple clips that were all filmed at the same time, you just have to base correct them and then throw your color grade over top. So we're gonna come in here, we're gonna go File, New, and we're gonna go to Adjustment Layer. Just like that, 1920 by 1080, boom, 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 and we're gonna drag our adjustment layer right on top of our footage. And basically what the adjustment layer does will enable our contrast again, is it's going to affect anything underneath it. So if I come into my adjustment layer and I decide, you know what, I want it to really feel like we're in the middle of the desert and I'm just gonna pop my temperature all the way there, then I can do that. But if I take away the adjustment layer, it doesn't affect the actual clips. It's basically, think of it as like a transparent coloring sheet, I guess, almost. You know, it's like if you're writing on a whiteboard, if I write directly on the whiteboard with a Sharpie, then it's stuck there. But if I put a transparent sheet of like wax paper or something over top of the whiteboard and I write on it with Sharpie, I can remove the transparent sheet of wax paper and the board's still safe. So that's why we use adjustment layers. So we're gonna reset that. Now we have our adjustment layer and we have our little bit of already added contrast through my, you know, hard lighting. But now I can come up here and if I wanna add more contrast, I can do it using the slider. Too much we obviously don't wanna do, but we can adjust it ever so slightly. It can be fun to have contrast. We're gonna add a lot more contrast later. Next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna come into our creative tab. So this again gives you the option to add a LUT. We're not gonna be doing that today. And you can adjust the intensity of that LUT. We're gonna be coming down into here to our adjustments. The faded film adjustment, essentially what it does, it just like scrunches everything to make it feel more filmic. We're not gonna mess with that today. We are gonna mess with the sharpening though, because when you're filming in log, everything is super flat and undynamic. So we're gonna just sharpen it up a little bit. That way we just bring back some more oomph to the image. So we're gonna sharpen this image quite a bit, but not too far. I kind of like where that's looking. Boom. And the next thing we're gonna do is we're going to add some vibrance to the image. So vibrance is different from saturation. Saturation is just how much color we're seeing. Vibrance is how much pop the color has. And vibrance is what I like to use because it really adds that extra pop to the image. So we're gonna go into our vibrance slider here. We're gonna adjust that just like so. If we go too far, it gets a little funky. So we're probably not gonna do that. Maybe right about there. I'm kind of liking how that's looking, not gonna lie. Yeah, I'm kind of liking that. And then we have saturation. This is just another adjustment of saturation. If you want to go crazy with the saturation, probably don't want to do it right there. We are going to be getting crazy with saturation in a minute though. And the next thing is the tint balance. So this is going to be the shadow tint and the highlight tint. So remember when we moved our shadows and highlights earlier? Well, this is going to take those shadows and highlights and it's going to push a specific color into those shadows and highlights. So we know the shadows are this portion up here with the roof and a little bit down below like the guy's feet. So we can push a specific color into that section if we want to. So I think I would like a little bit of teal or blue in there. And the reason for that is because the teal and blue is the opposite of the yellow jerseys that the Bananas are wearing. So we're gonna undo that by double clicking on there and we're just gonna push a little bit of a deep blue in there. Just like so. I think I like that. Highlights, same thing, we're gonna do that, but just with a little bit more yellowy, orangey feel there. I'm gonna find one that looks natural. I think I like that. So now we're already creating some good color contrast in this image. Next thing we're gonna do, well, actually before we do that, we have the balance. So this way we can see how much of this. So if I go this way, you see it's mostly the shadows. This way it's mostly the oranges. So we're just gonna find a happy medium there. I think personally I prefer it being a little warmer still. That's not bad. Next thing we're gonna do is our curves. So there's two different types of curves. We have the RGB curves and we have the hue saturation curves. So the way you read the curves is actually quite simple. The curve, again, it's another graph where the far left side of the graph is your shadows and the far right side is your highlights. So remember we adjusted shadows and highlights earlier? Far right is the highlights, far left is the shadows, and everything in the middle is our midtones. And there's one thing you need to know with midtones, and this is super important. Your skin is your midtones. That's just the way it works. Just on a graph, your skin is the midtones. And that's super important to know. So this first RGB curve is the white one. This is gonna affect your exposure again. So this is where we really add contrast. I told you I wanted to add more contrast to it, and you know, the contrast slider is cute. This is where the real deal happens. So I want to create a point in the middle for my midtones, because if you look at our midtones right here, which again is our skin and a little bit of our jerseys, they feel a little too blown out to me. So I want to lower the mids ever so slightly so that these can feel more natural. I also want to take the shadows, and because I want to create contrast, I want to lower the shadows a bit. And because I want to still have the image pop, I want to adjust our highlights by dragging those up. That's a little too contrasty for my liking, but now that I have this S curve, I can really go in and fine tune it. So we're just gonna drag, see what we like. I think this is a little too dark in the shadows now. Highlights, we can do one of these. Maybe we pull this guy more to there. Yeah, now we're talking. Now we can adjust that slightly more. Boom, boom, boom. And this basic adjustment that we're doing, I know I'm like trying to concentrate and not chatting as much, but it basically, look at where we started and now look at where we're finishing. We just have much more contrast in this image, and things that are supposed to be seen are being more seen, such as the jerseys. So beforehand, the jerseys felt a little too bright. Now they're feeling a lot more natural looking. Same thing with the faces. You can see the faces, we've retained a lot more information in them, but the sky, which is something that's bright to begin with, we'll come back to our hero shot there. Our sky just has a little more oomph to it now. So I really like how that looks. So our next curves that we're gonna do is our hue versus saturation curves. Now you'll notice up here though, when we go back to the RGB curves, we have red, green, and blue. And these are all great. We're gonna use them in a second, but essentially, I don't know how well I described it earlier, but you know, when you drag up, it makes it more bright, down, it makes it more dark. It's the same thing here, but with colors. And these are gonna be our keys to contrast later on. But for now, we're gonna slide down to our hue versus saturation curves. And the way you read these curves is actually quite simple. So you wanna create a sentence, and your sentence is, this graph, which is this, affects the second word of the first word. So what are our words? Well, our second word here is saturation. Remember, saturation is how much of the color we're seeing. And our first word here is hue, and hue stands for color. So this graph right here affects the saturation of the hue. And we have a little eyedropper right here. And basically what this thing does is if I click on our eyedropper, I can select any color on the image. So I'm gonna select our yellow bananas jerseys, and I'm going to affect the saturation of that hue, which in our case is yellow. So when I clicked on the yellow, it created 3 dots. The dot in the middle is the color I clicked on. And if I drag that dot up, it's gonna make it more saturated. And if I drag it down, it's gonna make it less saturated. So I'm gonna hold down Shift on my keyboard and drag this up, and you can see that I can add a lot more saturation to our yellow jerseys. Now that is looking fucking good already. And the idea with these, what you're basically trying to do is you want to make this subject, the focal point, the brightest thing in the image. Like I said earlier with our lamp up there, you know, I don't want the lamp to be the brightest point, I want my subjects to be. Same thing with the saturation. So I want the most saturated things I'm seeing to be my people. So we're gonna crank up those yellows. Dabo, he's the main focal point. He's rocking the purple, so we want to adjust his purples, just like so. Boom, boom, boom. We can maybe slide this over just slightly bit. Yeah, do one of these. Boom, boom, boom. Our oranges here, we don't really want to see too much, honestly, right? Like, because that's not our focal point. But if I do this, it's going to look really fucking bad. So we're going to make it a little more subtle with it. Honestly, maybe I do want to crank the orange a little bit just because there is some orange in there, but we're not going to go too far. Maybe one of these. I want the sky to pop a lot more too, so I'm gonna adjust that. I don't think that's actually my colors of the sky, so we're just gonna create our own point in there. Do one of these, boom, 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 boom. Yeah, there we go. And now this is allowing me to saturate just the things I care about in the image, which is super important. You know, I don't care so much about the colors of the brick walls or the green on the grass, you know, because if I just saturated everything to an extreme, it's gonna look bad, you know. This is maybe not the best shot to show that on. I'll show it a lot better on my next shot, but this is basically what I'm doing. I want to adjust the saturation of the things that are important, and just look at how great this looks here as Dabo's running in. He's getting all fired up. Let's go! Now this clip is really starting to pop, which is what I like. I like that a lot. Yeah, I'm liking this a lot. So we're here. Now what do we want to do? Our next graph, hue versus hue. So this graph affects the hue of the hue. So that means it affects the color of the color. So for example, I would never do this, but if I clicked on my yellow and slid it, it's gonna affect the physical color of the yellow. So now the party animals are up there with Dabo. Obviously, this is a little insane, but you know, that's how the graph works. And like, that looks kind of fucking cool, low key, but obviously it doesn't work for this shot because the Savannah Bananas are the yellow baseball team. But I can adjust the hues of some other things. So for example, this orange isn't really doing it for me. The orange kind of looks really just off. And that's just something, that's a Sony problem. Sony doesn't really do the best job with oranges. So maybe I do want to take the oranges and just ever so slightly, you know, just make them feel a little bit more red, just like that. And if I want to make sure I'm not affecting the skin tones, because you see Niznik's skin got a lot more red there, I can just adjust this and move this point in more and move this point in more so that we're not nearly affecting them as much. So you see that's super pink. This, not as much. We can adjust that, slide that over a bit. Maybe we want to do it more like this. Just got to find that happy medium point, honestly. But we just basically want to adjust the color of the guy on this side without affecting our skin tones. This might honestly be a really bad example. again, this is like a raw color grade. Like I haven't practiced this already, but if I want to affect that, I don't want to affect this. So maybe we just slide it in more. Yeah, I'm not hating that. Not hating that at all. Yeah, and now you can just kind of see where we started versus where we finished. You can see the orange looks a lot more like the Clemson orange, which is what I want. So now the next thing we want to do is we want to talk about our color contrast some more. So remember I said that contrast was the key. So we have the yellow jerseys, we have the oranges of their skin tones. We want that to contrast with everything else in the image. So the big thing I'm seeing right now is that, well, there's some trees behind them that are pretty green. The sky is, you know, pretty boring looking. So maybe, what do you think would happen if we took the green of the trees and maybe just made that a little more blue? Create some more contrast in there. How about that? I personally like that a lot, I think, because now we obviously want to be careful, but that just creates a much cooler looking look, you know? And again, remember, this is what we're doing with our whole color grade. We're trying to adjust our colors here. That is going to make this stand out. So now Dabo and the guys stand out so much more from those trees than they did back here. So much more. Now we did kind of slightly affect the color of the jerseys, which I'm not loving. So I think I am going to actually just undo this orange adjustment because I really don't want to fuck up our guys or the yellows of their jerseys. They still feel slightly off, so maybe it's back here actually that we messed up. Yeah, it is back here. So we're just gonna slide this over more. Just like that. It still adjusted the trees a bit, but now we're not really fucking up our yellow jerseys. It's looking better, not great though. And a lot of color grading is just trial and error. I think that's important to understand and know, is that a lot of it is just physical trial and error, because, you know, I'm not going to know what's going to look good or what's going to feel right until I do it. So I actually don't like anything I did on the Hue vs Sat Curves, so if I double click it, it all goes away. This is back where we started, and now we're going to be much more careful fine tuning our tree. So I'm going to actually hit the yellow first. Now I know this is the color of the jerseys. Don't touch it. Now we can come in here and adjust our blues on that accordingly. Boom, boom, boom. Yeah, that's looking better already. And basically what doing this, by having this point already made here on the yellows, this way I can adjust this and I'm not touching the yellows at all. So even if I go to the extremes, you see the yellow jerseys aren't changing at all. Obviously I don't want to go to the extremes though. But that's just a good way to preserve the natural color of those yellows. Maybe we want to pull Dabo's shirt back to where it had been too, so we can pull that guy up a bit. Yeah, now we're talking. Now we're looking a lot more natural. When we did this though, we did lose a little bit of saturation in the yellows, so that's an easy fix. Come back up here. Y'all already know the deal. Gonna crank that yellow saturation again. Maybe do a little bit more in there. Boom, boom, boom. And we're just creating a bunch of points here and just adjusting till we find what we like. That I'm liking a lot. Now, again, remember, since we did an adjustment layer, theoretically, if I hated this whole thing, I could just get rid of the adjustment layer and be back where we started. I'm actually kind of liking how this is looking though. We can play it back once more just to kind of see what we got, what we like and what we don't like. I'm not hating this right now. Definitely not hating it. Not in love with it yet either, so there's still more work to do. Next up, Hue versus Luma. This affects the Luma, or luminance, exposure, brightness of the hue. So if I wanted to go crazy here, which maybe I do want to do, I can take the yellows of the jerseys and slide this up, and you're gonna see they get brighter. I actually think I really like what that's gonna do. So maybe we will slightly drag it up. You have to be careful with this slider though, because this slider does, sometimes if you go too far, it really messes up your image. So just be careful with it. But I do recommend using it. We can also do it to their skin tones. Click on EJ's face there, boom. Making him pop a little bit more. Yeah. That's looking pretty good. Maybe it's too much, so we'll undo it again. It's all a game of trial and error. That's like the biggest thing I can say, is that it really is all a game of trial and error and seeing what works and what doesn't work. Yeah, that's feeling good. That's feeling real good. Now that we've got the Hue versus Luma done, Luma versus saturation, I'm just gonna tell you the rule here. This affects the saturation of the brightness. You wanna basically just drag the tops and bottoms of this graph down. So this graph is read just like this graph, where this is our shadows and this is our highlights. So we're basically just desaturating the brightest and darkest points so that the whites and the blacks still look white and black. Saturation versus saturation, that just, if you're feeling crazy about saturation, it'll do it. I'm not feeling crazy about saturation though right now. Now we can get into the grading portion. So now that we have, well, we've already started the grading portion, but now that we've made our adjustments so that our subjects are really standing out, now we want to really create that color contrast to just create the rest of the mood of this image. So we're here with Dabo. Next thing I want to do is I'm actually going to come into our color wheels and match here. And the color wheels are going to give you basically the same thing that these wheels down here for the shadow and tinted, except it's just going to give you more of it. So color wheels, here I can drag this point, and whichever way I drag it is going to be the color that it puts into my image. And the further out I drag it is the more of that color. So think of it as the middle is nothing, and then whichever direction I drag it, it's going to be more saturated in the color of that direction. So if I drag it very pink, it's going to saturate a lot of pink. If I drag it very teal, it's going to saturate a lot of teal. And that's basically how that works for the shadows, the highlights, which you know what they are, and the midtones, which if you were paying attention is the skin. So midtones, you always want to drag orange because the warmth is going to make our skin tone feel natural. Now, again, don't get confused with what I was saying earlier with sliding your temperature too much makes your skin look too spray tanny. This is kind of just affecting the middle ground of this. And we're just going to drag it towards those points there in the oranges and the yellows until the skin really feels natural. So you're going to notice there's a lot of, you make one adjustment and then you make another adjustment, and basically all we're doing is we're just making sure the subjects look as natural as possible while everything else looks as stylized as possible. So I think that looks pretty good if we just turn that off and on. We were a little too pink, now we're looking more natural. Shadows, I want to make, again, some color contrast. So the shadows, I definitely want to bring more blue and teal-y, just like this. Maybe more purple though, because this is Clemson we're talking about. So let's see what that would look like actually. Oh, I think I'm gonna like that. Maybe we do more of a deep bluish purple color. Oh yeah, that is looking good. Highlights, we want it to be, again, more in the yellows because the yellows, the highlight is, you know, in fact, our Savannah Bananas. So we can slide that, boom, boom, boom. I'm liking this a lot. Look at where we started with just our base correction to where we are now. This is feeling so much more stylized, so much heroic, and I'm really liking where it's coming along. I think my biggest critique right now is I think the jerseys, the yellows, might be a little too bright, so we're gonna come back in here to our Hue versus Luma. This affects the Luma brightness of the hue, which is the color. Slide that down slightly. Yeah, that's getting there. Now our next thing, we're gonna skip HSL Secondary for now. We're gonna go into our Vignette. So Vignette is a hack for relighting your image. So my subject here is Dabo, right? Dabo Sweeny, he is my subject. I want to see him first when I see this image. But the problem is that, you know, even though there's contrast and separation in this image, there's still a lot going on. You know, there's a lot of banana players. There's some of these Clemson guys. And honestly, if I take a look at one thing I don't necessarily love about this shot, it's the composition, right? Because, you know, you see a little too much of the Clemson worker here. It just feels a little off. So what happens if instead of having this scaled to 1080, since we're in 4K, we're right here. Now I can scale the image down slightly, scoot it to the side. Now I can put Dabo more in the dead center and lose some of that Clemson guy. This might be doing something here. This might really be doing something. We can pull up our guides in Premiere here. There, we can slide those to the side and we just pop this dead center. Now, okay, now we're talking, because now I can do one of these. I don't love that because that's like that. You can slide that there. Remember, rule of thirds, I want his eyes to be at the top of the frame. So if I slide another guide, that's about thirds. Not that, this, boom. Now we are talking, because now we took this shot and we just reframed it. Because remember I said earlier, it's important you have a 1080p sequence. And the reason for that is because now I can reframe my image to take what I didn't like, which was the fact that, that's just gonna be a mess, the fact that there were guys in the center there that were Clemson workers. I just wanna say Dabo. So now we did exactly that. So I'm just gonna copy this and I'm going to Option V, paste the attributes of the motion onto there so that that's matched up. Boom, now that's back matched up. Now that's more like that. And now we got ourselves a much better looking frame. Yeah, a much better looking frame. And the whole reason we did that in the beginning is because we want our subject to be the thing your eye gets drawn to. Now we took out all the distractions. We took out the distraction of the Clemson workers. Now we're gonna use the vignette to really adjust that. So when I vignette, the first thing I do is I drag the feather all the way down. Feather stands for like the blur in between the colors. So like if you have no feather, you'll see that when I add the vignette, it's just a very hard line, just like that. And the more I drag it to the left, the darker, the more I drag it to the white, or to the right, the brighter, the whiter. So we do that. Midpoint, adjust the middle. Roundness, adjust the shape. So I want the shape to be in there because we want Dabo to really stand out. If we do something like that, boom. Could do something like that. Yeah, that's looking good. Yeah, I'm liking that a lot. Boom. That's looking good. Now, I'm not loving the fact that this whole thing feels dark though. So what if we did more of a lighter vignette? That could be interesting. I think honestly my biggest problem right now is the midpoint. I just want to do one of these a bit. Yeah, that could be doing it. Because he really is the subject here, so I want to make sure that's like known. You can see where our roundness and midpoint are, so we want to make that slightly rounder. Do that slightly, boom. Now, look at how that looks compared to everything else. That is cool. I like that. Now, I'm not in love with it though. Maybe I do want it to be darker. I'm really unsure right now actually what I want to do. Because when it's darker, I think it looks more natural, but I think it has more of like an oomph when it's brighter. So I think I want to keep it brighter because he's really the subject. So honestly, I'm wondering if what I did where I was like really overemphasizing the yellows, maybe I want to be overemphasizing the purples. So maybe I come back in here to my curves and I just really want to give some oomph to those purples. Just do something like this. I need Premiere to concentrate for me. We just did something like this though, where we can really make like the blues and the purples have a lot more oomph. Yeah, that's looking better. That's looking better. Now that I'm liking a lot better. It has kind of like a dreamy feel to it, which I'm kind of liking actually. It kind of just feels like a, oh my God, this is a dream type of moment, which it was. Like this was such a cool moment and it kind of did feel like a dream. So I don't hate that. So yeah, I'm really liking how this is looking, but I think I want to do one more adjustment in our HSL sliders. So HSL Secondary is basically, think of it as a color mask where you're masking the colors. So I can pick the color I want to mask out, which is going to be the purple. And if I come in here, if I click this is going to show me an overlay of what is masked. So everything white right now is in my mask. Everything not white is not in my mask. So I can adjust this. So basically, I just want to have, I believe I just want to have Dabo in the mask, Dabo in the skin, because what we're going to do is we're going to make everything outside of it a different color. is the plan. So we're gonna invert this now. So now whatever adjustments I make down here are gonna happen to everything that's in the white. So it's gonna be basically everything except our skin and our shirt. So now I'll just show you real quickly. If I wanna adjust the temperature of everything else, boom, we can do it. And I'm really liking how that's gonna look. Or we can make it warm, or we can really do whatever we want with it. But I wanna go into our wheels here, and I just want to really push some color contrast into this. I like the teal personally. A little bit of teal never hurt nobody. Yeah, we can even make the mask darker or brighter. So probably wanna go about neutral. Maybe we don't need to move that. We can even adjust the contrast and the sharpening. So if I wanna just uncontrast everything that's not him, could be a really interesting look. Unsharpen everything that's not him. Don't want to do that though, because there's too much that's in there. But yeah, that's looking good though if we just push a little bit of this teal in there. I'm really liking that. Now maybe we come into our curves. So these curves I didn't describe earlier, these affect the colors. So again, remember, contrast is everything here. So the contrast being, you know, the green, if I push the green up, it's gonna put green into the image. If I pull it down, it's gonna put purple into the image because purple is the opposite of green. Blue, we can go up for blue, down for yellow. Red, we can go up for red, down for cyan. And I think I wanna add a little cyan into this. So our midtones, I wanna keep red, but our shadows, I wanna put a little cyan into, because why not, right? Our highlights, I don't wanna mess with too much. Yeah, now that's feeling good. That I'm starting to like. Now I'm still not sold on the white vignette. So I'm wondering what it would look like if I made that a darker vignette, but we're gonna just watch it first. But just look at how much more stylized this feels. How much more stylized it is feeling, you know? Because I think this is really getting good. I think I do want to maybe, do a darker vignette. So maybe we do something like this, but we just don't do it to an extreme. So we could do something like that and we just really keep it light, possibly. That I don't hate. I might change my mind though and go back to the lighter vignette. I'm not entirely sure. I think I prefer that though. But just look at how much like detail is in this image now. And not just the amount of detail in the image, just look at how much more this image pops. This is what we started with. This is what our image looked like. And this is what we got it to now. It just feels powerful, right? There's a power to this image and it just looks appealing and pleasing to the eye. Like this feels right to me. And I really like that. And the other thing that feels really right to me is the skin tones, right? Like their skin still looks like their skin. The yellow jerseys look yellow. The purple shirt looks purple, but there's just so much else going on with the colors of this image. I really like how this is looking. I think I might honestly leave this as is. I think I'm happy with this. Honestly, the only thing I would maybe do is speed ramp it, where like this happens quicker and then when they all put their arms up, that could be cool, maybe. But I think there's one more thing I want to do to this though. Maybe a few more things. First thing I want to do more to it is I want to add some film grain. Something I like doing when I'm color grading to create a cinematic look, especially during the day, because it's a lot harder to create jaw-dropping images during the daytime, just because during the daytime, the lighting just isn't as pretty as when it's darker. So we're gonna add some film grain to this. So I just have a film grain overlay for some 35mm film. Shout out to my buddy Christian for giving this to me. Vision color 35mm, that's it. So we're just gonna take the film grain and we're going to adjust that. Same way we adjusted the hard light earlier, except this one we are going to blend mode to overlay. Boom. How cool does that look having some film grain on there? Shot on fucking film, baby. That's the power of color grading. Look at that. It's maybe a little much, but I don't know. I might keep it low key. I was thinking about dropping it. Now, obviously this is a tiny clip, so we would need to do one of these. I'm probably gonna drop the opacity of the film grain a bit. Although I might not, because I really like how this looks. Like, I feel like film grain just like makes everything look better. And like, this was the like, if there was one moment from our game at Clemson that like if you had to ask anybody who was there, describe the Bananas game in Clemson in one word, it would be this tiger run with Dabo, Sweeny. Man, that looks cool. And all the film grain does, if you're not like a super nerd like I am, you may not understand the like whole film grain thing. And you know, it's hard to see honestly, because like that's it off, that's it's on. But it just adds more texture to the image, which I love. I think that looks so good, honestly. Yeah, that looks cool. That looks really cool, I'm not gonna lie. Yeah, that's cool. I think I want to adjust. Obviously, we want our adjustment layer above that so that it still messes with the green. So we can just pop both these down. I think I want to mess with our vignette's shape a little more, because I think I would rather the vignette cover more of the bottom of them than the top of them. Because if we do something like that, this might be what I messed up the first time with the vignette. Yeah. Because now basically what we're doing is, because I changed the shape of the vignette, so the shape of the vignette had been more rounded. I'm doing it more like this now because I don't care to see like his feet, like his, you know, his feet just aren't what's important here. I want to see his face. So we can do that, maybe adjust the midpoint slightly. Obviously we don't want it all the way because that's going to look quirky. Yeah, that is looking good to me. That is looking really nice to me, man. I'm really liking that. Now, if we want to get crazy, and I think probably what I'm gonna do when I make my, you know, Instagram reel of this is I might give it like a slight like widescreen look. But man, tell me that doesn't look good. I like that a lot. I think this might be done, honestly. I'm really liking the way this shot looks. There's just a lot of color and a lot of life to the shot. I think there might be too much film grain if we're being honest. Let me watch it in full screen just to see. Come in here, fit that to the screen. I think there might be too much film grain. I might lower the opacity of the grain a bit. But man, that looks cool. Compared to where we started, I think this looks pretty insane. I'm really happy with how this looks, actually. To quote Sam Sulik, some time has passed. It is now the evening, just got back from a workout, got showered, cleaned up, and figured let's color grade our second shot. So we're gonna dive in here. And honestly, looking back at this first shot, I really like how it's looking. The only thing I've done since last time we were together is I did add some widescreen bars just to see what it looks like. You know, because sometimes that can be fun just to change the aspect ratio. But yeah, I'm really happy with the color we got for this first shot. So let's dive into our second. So we're going to hop into here, go back into our footage from Clemson, boom. And the next shot I want to do is this shot right here of Bryson Bloomer after his home run. So you can see I was originally following the defense because Banana Ball is a very defense heavy game. So you can see I was on the pitcher, ball goes up, and now I got a really cool shot of Bloomer rounding the bases, and that is the next shot I want to color grade. And if you're wondering why the Savannah Bananas videographer is color grading shots of the party animals, I actually work for the league, not the team. So I work for all the teams. So when I'm down there shooting, I'm just shooting gameplay as it happens. And you know, if the bananas do good, I'm filming the bananas. If the party animals do good, I'm filming the party animals. And if we're being completely honest, I'm a party animals fan. So let's get this shot of Bloomer rounding the bases. So again, we're gonna scale it just like so. I'm gonna adjust the size of our viewer fairly slow. And again, if we take a look at this shot in our little media manager right here, this was in the top of the second. You can see it is again 60 frames a second. So we're going to slow this down 40%, just like so. All right, so let's get rocking. So I think I want to start the clip. We do get some nice depth there. We go slightly out of focus. I think I want to start the clip right about here as Bloomer's taking off his helmet. We'll let it play out just like so. And now here's where we get the big smiles and the point. The point is what I love the most about this shot. That is just so fun. So cool. And then he tosses the helmet. Pretty sick. So I think I want to, for the sake of this, I want to cut the helmet toss because I start to zoom out. So I think we're gonna just go right here when the foot touches the ground. Boom, that'll be our cut point. So this is the shot we are going to color now. And again, we're gonna do everything exactly the same as before. But the first thing I wanna do is I wanna fix the horizon, because you'll see the shot looks slightly crooked. A big problem with these NFL stadiums is that like the not field portion is sloped down, because that's just the way NFL football stadiums, or I guess in this case, college football stadiums are. So it was a little hard to rotate the hi-hat that I was using, but we can just adjust that 1 degree, scale this puppy back up, and then scale it down again, just like that. And I think that looks pretty good. And we're gonna find our hero shot, which I believe is gonna be the exact frame where Bryson lifts up his hand, just like that. I mean, money right there. So we're gonna mark that by hitting M on our keyboard. And just like last time, we're gonna do the same exact sequence of events. And actually, we're not gonna make this our hero shot. We're actually gonna make this frame our hero shot. And I'll explain why in just a moment. But there's actually a reason why I'm using this shot as the next example, and that is because obviously it's gameplay, so there's a lot more to see, but also because of the grass. But we're gonna get to that in just a moment. So once again, we're gonna pull up our Lumetri Scopes here. We're gonna start with the base correction and then do the color grade. So again, I wanna have kind of like a heroic cinematic feel to this shot, you know? It's a home run. Even though the wall was 190 feet, it's still a big moment for him. So we're going to try to convey that with our color. So once again, the first step we're gonna do is we're gonna lower our black point, just like so. You can see we're kind of peaking down here, so we probably want to slightly bring that up, just about to there. Then we're going to adjust our whites. And again, it looks like I was slightly underexposed, and you know, that's kind of frustrating. Like I always try to be perfect exposure in camera, but sometimes heat of the moment, you get slightly underexposed. But that, hey, it's how it goes. And especially with S-Log, like you're supposed to overexpose S-Log to get the most dynamic range. So that's a little frustrating, but you know, heat of the moment, things happen. Can't complain. We're gonna lower our shadows next. We're gonna bring these down, and yeah, you can already see just the sheer amount of dynamic range we're getting just by doing all of this. And then we're going to raise our highlights ever so slightly, boom. And that is looking pretty good. We're gonna add a little bit of contrast in here as well, not a ton, because we're gonna add real contrast in a moment. I just like to do this slider ever so slightly. I don't really always know why, but on shots like this, where there's a really shallow depth of field, like you can see there's a ton of separation between my subject, which is Bloomer, and the background, which is the stands. We even got like the outfielder in there. It's just nice to add a little extra contrast boost, because contrast is always a good thing. So next up, we're going to white balance. And white balancing here, we're going to follow the same principle that we did in our first shot, but we're gonna actually add one step forward, because we don't only wanna adjust the temperature and tint sliders to make the whites white or to make the skin tones look skinny, that's crazy, or to make the skin tones look like, you know, accurate. We also want to adjust it to the mood. And the party animals wear pink jerseys, so we know for a fact that no matter what I do, I want my tint to be more pink, more magenta, because it just isn't going to look right if I have too much green in the jersey. That's just going to kill the jersey. And remember, when you're color grading, you want to make the colors of your subject be what stands out, because you control what colors our eye sees. And obviously he's wearing a pink jersey. I want to see the pink in this shot. So again, we are going to white balance for his skin. We can use the teeth as a white guide, but again, we want to make the skin look more accurate than anything else. So we're going to go slightly cooler and then slightly more magenta. Now again, like, could we have left the white balance how it was? Yes, but, and would it technically have been correct? Most likely, but we want to have that pink in there. We want to have the magenta in there because he's wearing a pink jersey, and because it's going to make the skin tone, the flesh, look slightly more accurate. So like, if there's one thing I can stress enough in this video, it's like, please white balance to their skin, not to something white, because that's going to make the image just look so much more accurate. And it's like those little details are the things that make your videos look better, right? Like, you know, what's the difference between a bad color grade and a good color grade? You don't know until, you know, you're looking at it, but you know one looks better than the other. That's one of those things that really makes it look better, is having those accurate skin tones and having the temperature and tint affect the mood of the image, you know? You know, so just kind of like, if we were in a hypothetical example, if this game, instead of being played in Clemson, was being played in the deserts of Arizona and it was 150 degrees on the field, hottest game in the history of the sport, then I'd be a little more hesitant to slide the blue slider, because that's not gonna give me the mood that I want in this shot. You know, I would want the shot to feel super warm. But here, since it was just a regular game and he's wearing a pink jersey, we want to have that magenta in there. And the last thing we're gonna do again is 150, just like that, on our saturation. And the reason why I'm doing this, I don't know if I made it super clear. The reason why I'm doing this is if my base saturation is all the same, then I can take my adjustment layers. So say I wanted this shot of all the bananas, say I wanted this exact look for the shot of bloomer, which I don't, by the way, but say I did, I could just copy and paste that adjustment layer, and then all of the, you know, additional saturations of those yellows would automatically be applied and it won't look wrong. Obviously, that looks terrible though. So we're not gonna do that. We're just gonna get rid of that. Why does it look terrible though? Comment down below if you know. I'll spoil it though. It looks terrible because this clip was being colored for the yellows. It's made for the yellows. So the pink isn't really getting any effect in there. You know, it's made for the yellow. This shot, we want to really color for the pink. If I want to make this shot stand out, I want to make the pink jersey stand out. I want to make his flesh stand out. I want to really make the moment stand out, as opposed to making, you know, the yellow jersey. Because if I made just the yellows stand out like before the shot, you're barely going to see bloomer, but you're going to see the outfielder back there. And that's not what you want. So that's why each shot gets colored differently. Now, if I was making a movie, it'd be slightly different. You know, if I'm making a movie, I would probably be more, you know, fine-tuned that one look could go over everything. I mean, especially if I'm making a movie of bananas versus party animals, I would kind of create a look to begin with that had both the yellows and the pinks being adjusted, and then like slightly fine-tuned from there. But this is its own shot. We're gonna do it on its own for the sake of the tutorial. So we're gonna pop back to our hero shot right there. That is our base correction. I'm gonna do the same exact thing we did last time because this was still during the day and I wanna really have a cinematic feel. So again, if we hold down Option on our keyboard and drag up, we can duplicate the clip. We're gonna bring the saturation all the way to 0, and we are going to do a hard light mix, just like that. And like, that looks fucking sick, but it's definitely too much. So we're going to lower our opacity again, to where it looks about right. I'm not looking at the numbers here. The worst thing you can do is color grade purely off numbers. So I'm trying not to look at the number because I remember it was like 30 something that we did last time, but I like how this looks right now. And it is a higher mix, but again, it's a new shot, it's a new moment, it's a new scene, it's a new scenario, it's a new camera composition. And that's why these things are so fine-tuned. Like, you know, if this was the same shot as Dabo, then cool, but it's not. So I like how that looks. Now we can get into the grading. So again, we're gonna come in here, add our adjustment layer. Now, every time you add an adjustment layer from this bin, it's not going to have any of those adjustments previously on it. So it is a blank canvas. So let's color grade. So now that we're here, we're gonna hop into our creative panel and we're going to sharpen again because we wanna really add some sharpness. If you go too much, it's gonna look bad. So I like to go a middle ground. Again, I'm using my eyes here, not the numbers, because there's not one right or wrong thing that's gonna work for each shot. And that's something that I think is important to understand. Like, it's not as simple as just plugging in numbers. You do really want to, you know, use your eyes as a frame of reference as well. We're going to up our vibrance as well. Yeah, that's looking pretty cool. I'm not going to touch the shadow and highlight tints just yet in this shot, but what I am seeing right away in this is that it almost feels, I don't know what it almost feels. The contrast feels nice. I really like the contrast and like the oomph that it's giving, but I'm not loving the highlights. I think the shot feels too bright now. So we're going to adjust that back to our hero frame using these curves. And I think what I'm really not liking is that his skin and his face is blending in too much with the crowd in the background. That's what I'm not liking here. So we're going to try to adjust that using our curves. Again, the bottom of the graph is our shadows. The top of the graph is our highlights. If we go up, that's going to raise them. If we go down, it's going to lower them. So raising would be brighter, lowering would be darker in this scenario. So we're going to lower some of these midtones, and that's already looking significantly better, especially on the jersey. Yeah, that's looking much better. And so it feels monotonous. Like, why am I stretching my whites all the way high and my blacks all the way low just to adjust it more in here and kind of like reverse them? And the reason for that is I'm trying to really fine tune the dynamic range out of this, because I would not get this sharp contrasty look if I just hadn't pushed my whites all the way. So that's why you want your whites to always be to the top of the scopes and your blacks to always be at the bottom of the scopes. It just gives you that full range. And I do want to slightly up the blacks, not much. Highlights I also want to kind of sort of up, but I only want to up them on his face. So we might have to add a couple more points here, just like so. Yeah. Oh yeah, that's looking good. That's looking real good. I'm really liking how that's looking already. But if you've been paying attention, the next thing I'm not liking is that his jersey isn't popping. I'm actually a little nervous about this. Again, I'm coloring these shots for the first time because the crowd also looks very pink. So we might have to get really creative here, but we're going to raise the pinks of his jersey. Just like so. Boom. That's looking pretty good. I'm not sold on it at the moment, but that's all right because we've got time to adjust. So the reason I'm not sold is the crowd behind him. There's still not that separation. I also want to up the saturation of Bryson's face a bit, slightly. Not bad, not bad. We're definitely getting there. We are definitely getting there. So when we're creating the look here, I want to have a cinematic look, like I said. And in the beginning of the video, I talked about the orange teal look and how that's great. And, you know, being in Clemson, I think, you know, a little orange teal could be nice. But I think I might want to go a little more creative with the colors. So we have here the opposite of red is cyan. I think I want to push some cyan into just the crowd. So if we look at this curve here, the crowd obviously was in a lot of these middle sections here. So when I want to push the cyan into the crowd, I'm going to drag down to get the opposite of the red, and we can push that cyan in there. And that, my friends, is starting to get where I want, because I didn't like that the crowd was too pink. So we're subtracting that pink essentially by pulling down on those cyans. We obviously don't want to go all the way. I'm just doing that for the example. The reverse would be to do something like that. But that's where these color curves can be so fun, because they really let you pull colors out of certain areas of the image and into other areas of the image, which is going to be super nice here. So I want to pull the pinks out of the crowd, just like that. Same with the shadows. Actually, I think I like the curve looking a little more like that. Now, his face, I want to still have some pink, but I might need to adjust that separately because I don't want to mess with the crowd, which I'm okay with doing. Do a little bit of that. And that, my friends, you can see what a difference that made there to just creating that separation on Bloomer as he's rounding the bases. I mean, that is a massive difference there. Now, obviously we have a pretty big problem, which is that his skin doesn't look natural at all. And I said earlier, skin tones were the most important thing. So how are we going to fix the skin tones? I think a lot of it's going to come from this Hue vs saturation curve. So the skin, even though the face is what I'm worried about, I'm going to do the skin tone to his arm because I feel like that's just going to give us a better reading. See it adjusted right there. So we can come here, boost that ever so slightly. Which isn't quite doing a ton actually. Again, I'm doing all these color adjustments and such for the first time, so there is going to be some trial and error in here, which is a lot of what color grading is, you know? You're not going to be perfect the first time around. I also want to really crank the neon greens in there, so we can do one of those. Let's see what that's looking like. Yeah, that's not looking bad. That's not looking bad. Yeah, that's definitely better than where we started. We can just turn that off and on. You can see we're just really making the image pop now. Like, you want to see the colors of what's important in your image. I can't stress that enough. I feel like his face still feels a little flat though. So I think what I want to do is I'm going to, well, there's two things we could do. I'm going to Hue vs Luma first and just add some brightness to his face. Obviously there's not a spotlight that goes on the batter as they're rounding the bases, but I do want to add a little bit of brightness to Bloomer's face. So we can come in there, do a little something like that. And that's already really helping him stand out from the background. So you can see what that looks like off and then on. It did affect the background a little bit, but because of all the bokeh, I'm okay with that. So let's play the clip and see what we're playing with now. Because that, my friends, is looking pretty cool. Not gonna lie, that feels heroic to me. It's got a really interesting look too, you know? Yeah, I don't hate that. I really don't hate that, but there's still more work to do because I feel like there are still things that could be better about this. First up being the grass. So the reason I'm showing this clip anyways in the first place is because I see with a lot of sports videography, the grass just looks off. So I want to adjust that. I want to desaturate the grass as much as possible. So you can see when we hit our point there, that's the color of the grass. I just want to mute that a little bit. I've just found that it looks better when the grass is muted. I know some people disagree with that, but I prefer a muted grass because I basically don't want this. I don't want the grass to be distracting in my image. So I like to have the grass a little more muted. We could even mess with the color of it a little bit. You know, sometimes I've found that I like making things that are supposed to be green a little more blue. I just think it looks cooler personally. It just gives that, like, you know, again, color contrast. Skin, pink jerseys. What's that contrast with? Orange, teal, you know, pink, like red, cyan, you know, things like that. So I like that a lot more personally. And now we're really getting something interesting here. You know, this is really starting to look good. I think I want to boost the purple a little bit too, just because it is Clemson, so might as well show them a little bit of love, just a tad. Nothing too crazy, but this is already starting to look pretty good. Again, our Luma versus saturation curves, these we're just gonna drag both ends all the way down. This way, the whitest white point and the blackest black point of the image don't look at different colors. So for example, the helmet, if I was to go into my shadows down here and just push a lot of a certain color, the helmet would get more and more affected if I didn't have that Luma versus saturation pulled all the way down. So we're gonna do that. And that's a perfect segue into our color curve. So I want to add some more color to this. Big thing being I want to create a little bit more of a teal separation here. So Bloomer, who is our subject, isn't really in the shadows at all, so we can adjust the shadows as is. Maybe we want to push a little more purple because we are in Clemson. I don't love that though, because I put a lot of effort into getting rid of the purple in the background, so I think I want to stick with that. So maybe we just do a little teal action. I don't hate that. Midtones again is the skin, so we always want that to be more on the warmer end, so we could just drag that maybe there. I don't hate that. Yeah, I don't hate that. And then highlights, I'm not sure where I want to go with the highlights. Maybe a little cooler, maybe a little warmer, maybe a little pinker. A lot of it is also just, you know, physically playing with the wheels and just seeing how they affect a given image. Because, you know, I know what I'm looking for. I'm looking for contrast, right? Like that's what I'm aspiring for. But I can get that in a lot of different ways. So I just adjust the wheels until I find that contrast that I like. And I think I'm liking what that's doing there. And now we're gonna add a vignette. This one is not gonna be nearly as difficult as the shot of Dabo. I know for a fact that I wanna have a darker vignette on this shot because that's gonna really, really help create that separation. So what the vignette does is it draws your eyes to a certain place in the image. So again, we're gonna lower the feather so we can just see what we're doing. And now we can have some fun adjusting the roundness. Now the problem is that, and again, when I'm feathering, I drag the feather to 0 so I can see where the vignette is actually affecting. So I can see, okay, this is how much this midpoint is, this is how much this is, because again, I want to be able to see. And then when I'm done, I'm going to drag it all the way to 100 so it's, you know, basically invisible. So now when I see this freeze frame, I don't think I'm seeing a vignette because it's so subtle because the feather's all the way at 100. But I do want to maybe make it slightly more. So again, we'll come down here, see what we like, see what we don't like. Something like that. Maybe something like this though. Although I think I'd rather do something like this. My only concern is that because Bloomer does start not in the dead center of the frame here, I don't want him to be too dark, so I can't go in too far. In a perfect world, if I would have kept him perfectly centered throughout the entire shot, I could have my midpoint be right here and really have a pretty relighting of the image, because essentially what the vignette's doing is relighting it. I can't do that though because I wasn't perfectly centered here. And again, look, sports is hard to shoot because you only get one chance. So, you know, you take what you can get. If this was a feature movie, I would 100% ask the director, can we do another take so I can have him more centered? Because I know that would make the color grading easier in post. But that's not the case, but we can vignette that. And now we can let this play, just like so. That's looking pretty good to me. I really like how that's looking, especially this frame right here. That's really looking good. That's really feeling movie-like. Yeah, I'm getting happy with that. I think I almost want to bring a little bit more brightness into Bloomer. Because just looking at the scope, I feel like I can push it a little higher. So I might just get a little crazy and on my adjustment layer, do a little one of these on the whites. Although it is getting slightly blown out there, so maybe I don't want to do that. Or maybe I just want to find a happy medium, because you can see here, we are definitely losing some information there. So I actually don't want to be doing that. And honestly, we are losing way too much information everywhere, which I believe is coming from our Hue vs Luma curve. So if I turn this off, now we haven't lost all that information. So we're going to actually just completely undo that. And look, again, like I've been saying, like color grading is not just go. Like once you find the look you like, you have to make those fine-tune adjustments and have that attention to detail. Because I'm just going to Command Z again, like, you know, I could put out the shot like this, but look at how much noise is in some of those orange places where it's just too bright. So we're going to just undo that. But I can, again, raise up here, slightly into the whites, maybe slightly into the highlights. I really don't want to go too crazy though, because I don't want to lose any information in the image. We do something like that. I think we might be in a pretty good spot though, because I'm really liking how that's looking. Yeah, that looks cool. That looks really good to me. I'm really liking that. Is there anything else I would change about this shot? It almost feels like a shot on film, this shot. Like that looks so good, which is perfect because I am gonna throw my 35mm film grain on there. That was such a bad transition. I'm gonna be lazy because I don't feel like re-upping all that stuff. We're just going to copy and paste these. So we're gonna option up our this adjustment layer so that we can drag these guys, option drag them over here, and boom, that's looking real good. Yeah, I'm really happy with how that looks actually. So now let's move on to the final shot of this tutorial, which is going to be a night shot. And I want to show, again, all the options. So we're going to go into our night shot, which is in our last card of footage. And I think I want to do this wide shot of all the bananas for this one, because I really like this frame right here, because you can see the whole scope of the stadium. And what's really cool is that, you know, the crowd's all still there and we get the light in there, and there's just like a really cool, weird, like composition element here that I was definitely going for. I wanted this shot to feel larger than life. But I think just something about the composition of the guys looking so little and the field and stadium rather looking so big under the lights, I just really like it. So let's color this shot. So again, we're gonna pick our in and out points. think we're gonna start with the guys bowing down. We're also gonna slow-mo this again. They're all in 60 frames a second. They jump up, boom, confetti. That's a sick shot. What goes by the screen there? There's like a bug or something that flies by, that's crazy. But that is a cool shot right there. Nice finale shot. I think I'm gonna cut it before that bug flies in. Yeah, that's a fun shot. So, nighttime shots are pretty much the exact same process, except there is a couple extra things I'm gonna do for the shot. But what's important to notice here is that because the sky is dark, because the sky is black, because it's the night sky, I wanna be extra careful that my blacks are not clipping here, but I also wanna make sure they are actually reaching the darkest point so the image looks as full as possible. Because right now, it looks super flat, obviously because it was shot in log, but I really wanna make sure that I'm getting my exposure nailed correctly here. So we're gonna start the same way we've been starting all of them, black point all the way down. You can see right there, we're barely touching. I think we can go a little further, honestly. Yeah, I like that. You can see right there, slightly touching. Again, I really don't want to go too far with this because you can really kill a shot by going too far. So I'm gonna leave it like that for now. Whites, we're gonna bring up, and remember what I said earlier, is I want my subject to be the brightest part of the image. So I don't care if the stadium light is peaking here, because that's not the subject, it's a light, it's supposed to be bright. But I don't want this marquee to be so bright that I can't read Bananas win on it. So we're going to adjust, and again, if we just look at our scope, this is the marquee right here, so this is what I want to make sure isn't getting too bright, which honestly it's about the same brightness as the light, so the light might not get too bright either, but can go about there. You'll see if I go too far though, you'll see now I can't read Bananas win, which I don't want. So we're going to go just barely to the top. I'm going to be a little more cautious than not cautious here. I like that. And we're going to lower our blacks once again because they moved just like so. The other thing I like about this shot that's really cool is that you can read the Clemson welcomes you to Death Valley here. That's just me being a nerd, but it's just perfectly lined up that the guys were underneath it. So I think like if I was to cut this vertical, it would actually look really sick. So yeah, sometimes you get lucky with your composition. So we got our white point, we got our black point. Next, we're gonna do our shadows. We're gonna bring down the shadows. This is where it gets fun because now you can really see us pulling the dynamic range. But again, if you go too far, we're losing the crowd, which I don't wanna do. However, I do wanna bring my shadows down a good chunk though, and then I will raise the midtones of the crowd. So I think I like the shadows to about there. And then the highlights I'm gonna really bring up because I want the Bananas to be the stars here as they are. They won this game, so they get to celebrate. And we're gonna adjust the shadows a little bit more. And again, you know, every time you raise the white point or the highlights, you're gonna have to re-lower your shadows because it just kind of brings it along. But this is how I'm pulling the most dynamic range out of my image, just by doing this process. You know, these cameras are so good, like Sony, Canon, you know, Red, like Arri, like all these cameras are so good. You get so much dynamic range out of them. You want to make sure you're taking advantage of it. So this is how I take advantage of it. I don't think I want to do any of this contrast slider right here, but I do definitely want to do a white balance adjustment. Now you're going to see that the guys look very green here. These lights were hard under this, like once the lights turned on in the stadium, the lights were hard, I'm not gonna lie, like it was hard to white balance, but the guys look way too green here, so that means I'm gonna have to push some more magenta, and if I want to push magenta this way, I have to push the temperature to the other way, which is gonna be blue. So we're gonna go a little cooler on the guys, and then push in the magenta, and you can physically see what that's doing to the skin tones. It's actually incredible just how much more natural all the skin colors are looking already. Just having that cool feel. So I like that quite a bit. I think that's getting there. The only time we ever color grade by numbers, 150 on the saturation. And that, my friends, is our base correction. Now just looking at the base correction, I have to ask myself, does this look like what I actually saw with my eyes? And if we're being honest, this feels a little too purple now. So I want to adjust it. Because, you know, this is not what the Savannah Bananas jerseys look like. Like they are not this odd of a color. So we want to fix this. So we're going to scoot it a little bit more that way. Let's scoot that one way, let's scoot this one way. And this is literally just a game of adjusting till it looks right. Adjusting till it looks right. Now there is a way to do this with the vector scopes, and I do like using the vector scopes time and time again. However, I found that I can get more accurate if I just use my eyes and really make sure I'm pushing the colors that I need to be pushing into the image, into it. So personally, I'm gonna go by my eyes because I'm more worried about their skin tones right now than I am their jerseys, but I don't want their jerseys to look super off. So I'm looking at DR right here in the middle. I'm just trying to see when his skin, the white of his hat and his jersey all look about right. Maybe about there. Maybe about there. I don't love it, but maybe about there to start. I'm going to use this as our starting point, and now we're going to add our adjustment layer. Now you're noticing I'm not doing the whole hard light mix thing here, and that's because this is a nighttime shot, and just I don't need to add that extra oomph to the contrast because there is already so much contrast between our really bright lights and our really dark skies. So we don't need to add any extra with little hacks, but we are going to add contrast. So we'll get to that in a moment. But first, sharpening and vibrancing. So we're going to sharpen our image ever so slightly. Now, because this is such a wide shot, it naturally feels a little soft. So I don't want to go all the way, obviously, but I do want to maybe go a little further than I push some of the other shots there, just to really make sure that the guys are all pretty sharp. You know, when you're shooting this wide, it is hard to have a sharp image, but there are advantages to shooting this wide, obviously being, you know, you just get such the whole scale of everything. So I'm happy with that. We'll crank our vibrance a bit too, just like so. Yeah, I'm not hating that. Shadow tint, I definitely know I want my shadows to be blue. This is a shot that, you know, again, I've been saying all video, contrast, contrast, contrast. The yellow jerseys are going to contrast so nicely with blue in the shadows. So we're going to be pushing a lot of blue into our shadows, but we're not gonna be doing it right here. We're gonna be doing it later on using our curves. But first I want to adjust the contrast using this curve. So again, middle is our midtones, so we're going to bring that slightly down. And you can see already just the sheer amount of contrast this is adding. But I don't want to go too far because I don't want to lose the whole stands. But I do really want to oomph some of the lights too. So basically what I'm doing is I'm creating an S curve. I don't know how much I've said that in this video, but basically an S curve is the secret to contrast, if you will, because you're getting brighter than you were in the highlights, you're getting lower than you were in the midtones, and you're getting about the same where you were in the shadows, and that's what creates contrast. So this is looking real nice. I'm going to adjust it slightly more. Basically, I want to adjust these so that the bananas are the brightest thing I'm seeing besides the light, but I'm still seeing the crowd and all the other stuff, such and such. But if I push it too far, it gets a little fucked up. So it's really, I mean, it's ironic that we're in a football stadium, but it is really a game of inches with a lot of this stuff, you know, just like making small movements or small adjustments rather that are going to make a big difference. Like this is a very tiny adjustment to the curve, but look at how much more contrast it adds to my image. Like contrast is the key. If I ever sell merch, there's going to be a shirt that says contrast is key because that just looks amazing. Now I get to do the fun part, which is our blue curve. So the opposite of yellow is blue. I think I've said that a million times in this video. So I know that I want to push blue into the shadows because the shadows are where the bananas are not. The bananas are very much in the light, in the highlights of this shot. So I want to push some blue into the shadows so I can create that color contrast. So it will just look much more appealing to the eye. And even though I want to mainly only adjust the shadows of this image, I'm going to still make a point in the middle here because if I don't, it's just going to take everything with it and look real bad. Actually, I need to go up, but you get the point. So we're going to put a point in the middle and then we're going to make a point for our shadows and just start to push some of that blue into it, just like so. My computer may be shitting itself a little bit. It's had a long day, but we're just going to, again, adjust this where the bananas are not getting any of that yellow, but the rest of the field, mainly the rest of the sky, the rest of the crowd is. And I mean, like, damn, that's looking cool. We can maybe push a little bit into the highlights too, ever so slightly. Yeah, I mean, this is looking cool. This is looking cool to me. I want to bring this down because I don't want, you'll notice if you watch the whites of their arm sleeves, they get way too blue when I pull this up. So I definitely know I want to pull this down. Again, pulling it down is subtracting blue from the image. Pulling it up, like I'm going to do in the highlights right here, is adding blue to the image. Maybe add another point in there. This is feeling real good. Maybe add one more. That's looking cool to me. Now there's still a lot of issues with this shot. Main thing being the yellows aren't yellow enough for me, and they're still feeling a little green, if we're being completely honest. But I think a little saturation will solve that. So we're going to select the yellow of the jersey. Again, we're going to hold down Shift and pull the middle dot upwards, and now the jerseys are all yellow. They're looking a lot better. That's looking way better. It might have been too much. So you're going to adjust it ever so slightly. Yeah, that's getting there though. That is definitely getting there. Other things that I don't like with this image. Let's see, what about the grass? I don't know if I'm loving how the grass is looking. So let's adjust the saturation of the grass first, which is gonna be real difficult because it's there. Obviously I don't wanna do that, that looks hideous. But we can bring the saturation of the grass down a bit, just like so. You gotta be careful because a lot of the times with the bananas in particular, because the yellows of the jersey are so close to the hue of the But with the bananas in particular, you want to be careful because the yellows of the jerseys are so close to the green hue of the grass that you don't want to, push it too far. So I think that's looking pretty okay. I'm happy with that. I'm really loving the way the confetti looks. Like, I like the confetti more than I like the way the guys look right now, because that's just cool to me. I also think I want to up the saturation of the orange and the purple here, because I want the Clemson to really stand out, which might be difficult because it's all technically part of the yellow family, but we can make that work. Purple, boom. That's not bad. Yeah, that's not bad at all. And again, this is what our Hue vs Sat Curves are doing. And this is a lot of why I only bring my original saturation to 150, because it's kind of saturated but kind of not saturated, and that way I can decide what actually gets saturated, again because I want to draw my eyes to this. So this is looking pretty good, but there still is more work to be done to it, obviously. We'll Luma V Sat real quick. Boom, boom. We're gonna go into our color wheels. This is where we can get even more fine-tuned with it. But notice actually, when we did our curves here, you can see we actually saved that top part of that sky, because look at the sky right here. Now it's looking much better. So I actually want to adjust this even more, I think, because I don't want too much. I want it to look natural. I don't want it to look like I just pulled down that curve. So maybe we do one of these. Same thing with our highlights. And I know I'm not explaining this super well, but basically where my black point is, which you can see is right here, which may be clipping ever so slightly, so maybe we do want to, and that would be because of this, but maybe we do want to bring that up just a tad. I don't love how that looks, so maybe we'll go a little lighter. Boom. Basically, I just don't want there to be a spot of the sky that doesn't have the color in it. So I don't want to completely ignore this, but I also don't want to overdo it. So I think I'm just going to make it a more subtle curve. Something like that, possibly. Yeah, that is feeling much more natural to me than what I had. Cool, and now it's just not, the sky's not blue in a pitch black game at 9 o'clock. That's essentially all that did. I don't know if I described that the best, but that's essentially what it did. Shadows, we're going to bring some of our blue still more into it. Maybe more purple actually, low-key, because that's kind of fun, those Clemson-y colors. Although I think it's more visually appealing to have some blues, so I think we're still going to do something like that. I just want to be careful when I'm doing this that I'm not affecting the jerseys too much, because we just made the jerseys look how we want them. I don't hate that. These little dials on the side will adjust more brightness of just the shadows. So you can see that's raising more of the shadows, this is raising it down. I don't really know exactly what the benefit of using these as opposed to the ones up top are, other than this is done when the color is already added to it. So I do apologize. That's like the one bit of Premiere that I really haven't understood that well yet. But, you know, it is what it is. I'm adjusting the yellows now, the jerseys, or pushing more like yellow or orange rather into the midtones, which is becoming their skin and jerseys because of the way the shot is composed. Although midtones are also affecting a bit the crowd. Highlights I know is going to be this light, so I can basically just push it where whatever color I want that light to be. But again, it is still affecting our players, so we do need to be careful. So we can do a little something like this. I don't hate that. I'm not sure I love it, but I definitely don't hate it. Let's see. It is a cool shot. Like, it looks cool. Just trying to see what it's missing. The hard part with this shot for vignetting is going to be that I really can't vignette it too much because the guys are right here. So because the players are right here, if I just show you, if I vignette it too much, we're going to hit the players, like, because they're just not in the center. Like, this is a very creatively framed shot. So I want to make sure I'm not doing anything too crazy. However, I could maybe do something like this and bring the midpoint in a bit. I don't know if that did enough to really, like, it definitely does something. I don't know if it did enough to constitute the vignette though. So I think I want to try something else for my vignette here, which is going to use another adjustment layer, which is going to be an HSL adjustment. So again, HSL is basically color masking. So you're masking out the hue, which is this top slider, saturation, which is this middle slider, and the luminance or brightness, which is this very bottom slider. So we're going to set our key color to the yellows because I want to mask out the yellows of the guys. If we set this to white and black, we can see anything that's in the white is going to be what's masked. Anything that's in the black is going to be what's not masked. So I want to adjust this where I'm mostly masking the Bananas players, but I'm not masking the rest of what's going on here. So we need to adjust. I think luminance might honestly be the slider we want to mess with the most. Basically, this is what we're doing, is we're just adjusting this until I get my selection all in the white there. So we're gonna add another key to that color of the jerseys right there. Now we're looking better. And now we're looking much better, actually. I'm gonna add one more key, actually, so we can just click there, try to get, don't like that. But this is basically what we're doing here. And I think what I'm gonna wanna do is I'm gonna wanna invert this mask in a moment. I'll show you how I do that in just a sec. But basically, you'll see what I'm doing is I'm basically just masking out, using my HSLs, the players and the confetti, so that I can really affect everything behind them. So we're going to invert the mask by hitting this little button right here. And now when we come in here, I can just kind of, I think I want to, I don't know what I want to do actually. I want to almost darken it. Like, I don't want to go too contrasty, but like I almost want, like I definitely want to like add that contrast to the back where the players aren't, you know? Maybe we unsharpen some of it, but that's obviously affecting them, so I don't want to actually do that. Desaturating, I don't really want to do either. Maybe we just get crazy and we just like really do one of these. That could be interesting. I don't think I want to do that though. Maybe it's just as simple as pushing a little more blue into that part of the shot to just create some more contrast. A little bit more this way. That I'm not hating. We turn on and off our HSL. That's where we started, that's where we finished. I definitely like this better because now I'm more drawn to the guys because I'm not getting distracted by all the colors of the crowd. So I'm definitely liking what this is doing. I'm definitely liking what it's doing. Maybe, or that's blurring the mask rather, so I don't actually want to do that. Now Premiere is going to shit itself. Possibly we come lower the saturation of that part. I mean, that's interesting. Like, it's very interesting and it's cool, but I don't want to do that too much. So maybe we go slightly down. I don't hate that. And again, a lot of it too, just turning on and off really lets me see the adjustments I'm making. Basically what I'm trying to do is I want to be able to see that there's a full stadium here, but I don't want to be distracted by it. Because obviously when I yank the saturation, that's a crazy way to say it. When I push the saturation of the yellow jerseys, a lot of people in the crowd were wearing yellow. So I want to make sure that I'm not getting all that yellow in there. So what I'm doing is I'm masking out the luminance so that I'm saying, hey, like anything that is not this bright of the bananas, I want to mask out. And now I'm taking that and I'm darkening it by adding contrast and desaturating it. So now I'm really drawing my eyes to the bananas players. That's what I'm doing here. And I think that's working really well. I think the next thing I want to do is I'm going to add another adjustment layer here. And I think I'm going to do a mask. Because I think I want to do something to affect just this bottom part of the field, because the bottom part of the field is the big thing I'm not liking right now. So I'm going to add a mask right to the bottom here. And inside this mask, I think I'm going to darken it. I'm gonna add a feather to the mask, just like so, bring it down. Because a lot of color grading is just, adjusting the lighting of your shot. So I'm going to bring down that. Yeah, that's already looking much better. You can see we pull our mask back up. It's so subtle, but it's doing so much. It's basically creating that vignette that I wanted earlier, but doing it with, just having what I want. That's interesting too, honestly, low key. Hold up, let's see what this is doing here, because that's interesting. I don't want that, but that's interesting. I think I just made my feather too big. So when I come down here, I can really do one of these. Now I can make the feather a little bigger. Again, when I say color grading is a lot of just trial and error, it really is a lot of trial and error. But now, if we come in here and just fit this, you can see exactly the distance, or the difference rather, that made with that off versus on. Because now I'm really drawing my eyes to these bananas. Because before I was getting a little distracted because, it's cool, but the grass is really bright. Now the grass is darker. I like that a lot. Yeah, that's looking way better. So I'm really liking this. And honestly, this is just such a cool still frame. Like, man, this is a cool looking visual, but I want to make it look even cooler. And this is my last tip, and I saved the last tip for best. I'm going to add some halation to this light. So we're going to add, surprise, surprise, another adjustment layer. And this is a tip that I learned probably a year ago at this point that's really, really helped my color grading so much. And that is adding halation. So we're going to add an adjustment layer here, and we're going to create a mask in our HSL Secondary. These checkboxes on the side, when you check them, that means it's enabled. If I uncheck them, that means that's not part of the mask. So now I'm only masking the luminance. And if I set the white black to on, I can see exactly what's being affected. We're gonna drag this luminance all the way to the end, just like so. There we go. And we're gonna slide just this bottom bit. And we're basically just going to mask the lights of the image. So you can see here, if we go too much, we're gonna start getting the players. But right here, we can just mask the lights. Now, we're not gonna ever uncheck this box because right now we just have basically an overlay of the brightest parts of this image. So what we're gonna do now is we're going to go into our effects panel of Premiere and we're gonna type in a Gaussian blur. Throw that on there. And then we're gonna come in here. We're gonna set our blend mode, kind of like how we did hard light earlier. We're gonna set our blend mode to screen. So now this layer becomes completely transparent. If I enable it and disable it, you see nothing happens until we add in our Gaussian blur. Now you can see we're creating some halation. And that's cool. So adding halation really just adds like a glow. It almost makes it look as if I was using a Pro Mist filter. on my camera, except I wasn't. So we can come here, make it as blurry or as not blurry as we'd like. And I like to drop the opacity of this too, so it's not too much in your face. But there you can see we just add a little bit of halation, and that goes a very long way in just making your shots look interesting. That would be probably too much halation, although it's cool. But yeah, look at this. We can just really create a little bit of a glow on the lights. It just gives such a dreamy feel to the image. Just like that. So that's what the image looks like with the halation. This is going to be what it looks like with it off. So you can see it doesn't do much, but it just adds a little bit of a glow to the lights that just makes it look so much better. I think I actually want to add more halation, if we're being completely honest, because I like halation. I think it looks cool. Maybe something like that. That's kind of cool. Low key, if we just come in here, see it off versus on. Just look at the glow that that gives. I mean, it just gives like a dreamy look, and we can full screen this shot. I think I'm happy to call this shot done for now on the color. I'm sure that I will have other things I want to adjust, but just looking at it, I think I'm happy. I think the only thing I don't love, I think the guys, I think their skin might still be a little too orange. So let's actually fix that. We're gonna go back down to our original adjustment layer, and we're going to take a look at our players. I mean, it's not much, but you can see they just feel a little bit too orange to me. So we're gonna come into our curves. And I think that probably happened, yep, when I adjusted the orange of the Clemson thing. So I'm gonna sacrifice the Clemson paw print for my players. So you can just slightly desaturate all the orange. And that looks significantly better. Maybe add a little more yellow too, just for fun. Yeah, and there you go. That is our shot. Let's full screener, see if we like it. I think I like that a lot. Boom. Yeah, that looks cool. That looks really cool to me. I am very happy with that color. So 3 shots we color graded today in this video. We did our first shot of the guys on the Tiger run. We did our second shot of Bloomer after his home run. And we did our third shot of the Bananas after they won the game. And those were 3 very different looks, but that is basically the process I use when color grading. I know this was a very long video, and if anyone watched to the end, I seriously really do appreciate that. People have been asking about my colors, and I do like to spend a lot of time getting creative and really fine-tuning every little detail of the colors. And I think if there's one thing that you can take away from this, yes, color grading is a long process. It takes a long time, and there's a lot of, minute fine-tuning that has to go into making your shots really look perfect in the color grade, but it really does pay off in the end. It makes such a beautiful image, and if you follow these steps, I can guarantee that with a little bit of patience, you will get there too. But yeah, anyways, that is going to be it for this video. That is my full color grading workflow. This was a doozy of a video to make, and I really do appreciate you guys watching it. I hope that you all got something out of this, because I do like sharing the information I have. I want to help everyone out there grow, get better at their work, so we can all just make cool stuff. But yeah, that's gonna be it for this video though. That is how I color grade my shots. Again, that was the first time I've colored any of these clips. I have a couple other favorite clips that I am gonna color, but they're gonna be more so just a base correction and then copying and pasting these 3 adjustments on there. Follow me on Instagram if you want to see the final result of all these shots. But yeah, that's going to be it for this video though. Thank you all so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. And I'll talk to you all again in my next video.